I'll ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
How many people do you think, before reading the title of this podcast episode, realized that Sterlin Gilbert was on the California coaching staff?
Not me.
The passing game coordinators and the quarterbacks coach of the Cal Golden Bears this year is everyone's favorite Syracuse former offensive coordinator in Sterlin Gilbert.
Favorite is, it's a term.
A word.
Is,
yes, a term and a word.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Putting it kindly. Welcome to the Disloyal Idiots podcast, everyone. Christian de Guzman, alongside my friends Steve Haller and Andy Pregler here on the Fans First Sports Network. Hey, Syracuse is back to winning ways again, and Fran Brown can have a shower.
Yeah, that's nice because apparently winners get washed.
Look, man, winners get washed. Fran Brown is insane. I have this thing going with my group chat where we're doing this thing. Sorry, I just saw Steve's internal note that once again my mic, which is the logo for this podcast, continues to be terrible because I need to get a new mic at some point. I have a group chat going and there's a Big Ten fan in there. We're all coming up for the UConn game this weekend, so I'll see you all at the Dome.
Wait, you come up to the game that I have to bring 75 Cub Scouts to?
Yes, because I like to see you in pain.
Well, and
you get to see me in full Cub Scout uniform, buddy.
First of all, that'll be fun to see.
Pain.
Second of all, Andy will also be seeing me just as tired as him, probably, because I will also be making the drive up from New York City on Friday after going to the Barclays Center on Thursday to cover the Syracuse men's basketball game that is happening on Thursday at the Barclays Center for our sister tradition.
Christian and I will be doing the same things, except I will be enjoying and Christian will be covering. Hence,
and hypothetically, and we'll get to it later, but after watching these past 3 games of this basketball team, Christian won't be enjoying much.
Well, I mean, if trends dictate, I understand the level of competition is not the same. We're heading for 6. And by 6, I mean overtimes.
No.
UConn is on Saturday, buddy. UConn is on Saturday.
Oh, yes. Sorry. We're heading for 2 overtimes with a Righty Dixon fake punt on Saturday.
No, wrong. Okay, yeah, we'll take that.
No, I don't like any of this. I am doing the current debate of I am a season ticket holder for the Brooklyn Nets. Poor decisions were made, but
you live right there, so you know.
I do live right there. They are offering me free suite tickets for the game on Saturday, and so the question becomes, or for Thursday night, Thursday, because Saturday I'm going to be at the game, in Syracuse. But on Thursday night, the question becomes, do I watch Syracuse lose to Texas by 20, or do I go to my local pub and watch Steelers Browns on Thursday Night Football because I don't have Amazon Prime? And the answer is both of those are pain.
So I have the answer for you.
I do have the answer for you.
You go and watch Syracuse lose by 20 in a box where there will be a TV that you can have the Steelers game on.
Or, because I don't think many people know this, I'm pretty sure most of the games, I'm pretty sure every single game, unless something is different with my Twitch account, every single Prime Amazon game is just free on Twitch.
True. So
you can just go watch Syracuse lose by 20 and do the degenerate thing of having a Steelers game on your phone.
This is not helping my mental well-being.
You expect Syracuse sports and Yinzer sports to help your mental well-being, Andy. That is the first
weekend.
issue.
This weekend, 2-0 against the spread, 2-0 money line. Syracuse and Pittsburgh carried me this weekend in a way that
what if you added men's basketball to that?
Well, you know.
My wife was running a marathon Saturday morning, and so I kind of missed all of the Syracuse basketball game. But I would like to read you a text message that I sent to a friend, Chari, who I will not out with his last name, worked with me at Tops. He now lives in Syracuse, one of the many people that I see when I go up there. I texted Chari. Yep. Yes, Steve met Chari at 12:04 on Saturday afternoon. Quote, just moved to Blue Sky. Every single smart college basketball person is posting that Youngstown State Syracuse is a game to watch. I am terrified.
Yeah.
Guess what?
And they were right.
It ended up being a game to watch for particularly interesting reasons.
Yeah.
I don't love that. Like, look, if you are on Blue Sky on Twitter, it is very easy to access good college basketball writers. I think that the sport is in one of the healthiest it's ever been in terms of coverage. I mean this very seriously. I just kept scrolling and I was like, everyone is like, hey, games to watch today for upset alert, Youngstown State, Syracuse. And I was like, nope, this is bad. When every single person is going, hey, Syracuse might lose this game, it means Syracuse is going to lose this game. And they tried their best to lose this game.
So behind the scenes look for me for that game. That was my first game running a position for the Syracuse ACC Network Studios in Newhouse when they do their ACC Network Extra productions. That was a game of all games to get thrown into as a first time behind the scenes studio position. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve's like, it's like, yeah.
Before
it was one of the games.
Before we talk about the good thing that is football.
We're a vegetables first podcast.
We are indeed.
Yeah.
And this is coming from the guy who just watched the Steelers somehow beat the Ravens, who took the Bills out behind the woodshed in week 4, and the NFL makes no sense to me. So things don't make sense.
Well, yeah, somehow Andy Steelers somehow made Justin Tucker forget how to kick footballs.
Actually, technically, you guys are now transitively, you've transitively beat everybody because we just knocked out the Chiefs. Oh,
by according to transitive law, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the number 2 seed in the AFC over the Bills, with the Bills win over the Chiefs, which makes zero sense.
But because of the Cowboys lost, that means you've lost to every other awful team in the league as well.
But we've lost to an NFC team, which means that loss doesn't count by NFL tiebreaker logic because the NFL is very dumb. Much like the college football playoff, it doesn't matter who you lose to before week 5. It matters who you lose to after the games start mattering. We'll get to that in a second as well. But like bring it back home. Bring it back home to Syracuse basketball here. That was not good.
Yeah, no, what makes you say? The fact that we went to 2 overtimes against Youngstown State.
I couldn't hold that one together. That was just it was perfect.
Not good. Somebody asked me this question point blank and I could not answer them. They asked, what is different about this team than any other team over the last 4 years? And I could not come up with an answer. And I think that is maybe the heart of the malaise of the program right now.
That is kind of a weird thing because it's tough to put a finger on unless Christian's got an idea. But like, there's a lot of pieces that I very much like of what I see. And for some reason, the sum of the parts is not adding up to what it should. Or what I guess it's perceived to be, it should.
Right, and before Christian dives in with actual analysis here,
with not the feels that Andy and I bring,
right?
The feelings.
The problem is that this team has pretty much everything that we've had over the last 4 years. Like, are you looking for a team with transfers that could give you hope, but just aren't great? They're good. seems like a check mark. High level recruit, 5-star, who's probably going to leave the program at the end of the year, but not actually do anything impactful on the court. Kind of trending that way. Players who are getting more minutes than they probably should have just because of their seniority versus their talent. Like we've talked, all three of us have talked about this before in regards to this program before. And I think that's, at least in my feelings are, that's why this malaise is starting to set in now, because it's not just people who watch this team every game. It's the casual people who are like, I'm tuning in once every few games, but this is the same story, different jersey numbers.
And it comes back to something that Steve and I talked about with Sam when he joined us on the podcast during the bye week to preview the Syracuse team. And it's, who's going to be the alpha of this Syracuse team? Now, it definitely looks like it was J.J. Sterling against Youngstown State. He had a great game. But it wasn't definitely an efficient way for him to take over the game in terms of what you would normally see from a guy who you would think would be a scorer that takes over a game. Eddie Lampkin at times looked at it as well. But then free throws happened. And welcome back to Syracuse. Welcome back to, mid-90s, early 2000s Syracuse teams. Free throws matter. Surprise, surprise. You can't miss that many free throws, Syracuse. That's just not how it's supposed to go. You can't miss 13 free throws. That's not how it's supposed to go. So what ends up happening is something that we brought up a lot at the beginning of Red's tenure last year. And it kind of goes along with what we're seeing on the football side. This offense looks good, and when it's running consistently well, it's going to be very, very hard for defenses to stop because you have options all around the floor, whether it's Starling, Lampkin, Freeman, and when he's on his game, Chris Bell. But when you flip it to the other side, you have questions on defense that will not always necessarily help you support the offense that your team can provide, which is very much what we saw last year against Syracuse teams. That the Syracuse team can play offense, but once again, defensively, there are ways that this team will allow teams into games that you theoretically think they shouldn't be allowed back into.
I think my biggest, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I think my biggest issue when I watch this team is just that they are wholly uninteresting in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
It's. I don't want to say everything seems very milquetoast, but everything seems very milquetoast. You're right.
I'm Steve. I'm about to do a crossover with your other podcast.
Oh boy,
this just feels very last 5 years Amazing Spider-Man run.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And this is we're talking like we're not even to the Zeb Wells is doing random things that make no sense situation. Like we haven't even gotten to that stage yet. We're like full blown Dan Slott doing whatever Dan Slott does the same time he does it every other time. Like, yeah, I'm with you.
And I'm worried that the Zeb Wells thing is going to happen. I'm worried that we're going to get 40 minutes of J.J. Starling going 2 for 14 from 3. We're going to get Eddie Lampkin playing 30 minutes and 5 rebounds, 4 fouls, and 10 points. I'm worried that we're going to get just bench players cycling in and very minimal production here. It's just, I'm having a really hard time finding where in this current configuration we are going to see an elevation of what's on the floor.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because I think it has to come from two people who didn't do particularly well for Syracuse, and it's the other two starters in Bell and Carlos. You need Bell to hit his threes, and you need Carlos to create more offensively without giving up too much defensively like he was the past couple of games. Especially against Youngstown State, Carlos got exposed defensively, where it was just way too easy for the Youngstown State guards to drive by him and score easily at the basket. So much so that Lampkin only had one foul, maybe partially because by the time the guard got past Carlos, Lampkin's probably thinking, well, there's not much I'm going to do to stop this guy from scoring. And if I do try to stop this guy from scoring, I'm going to pick up a foul. So, and with the frequency that was happening in the Youngstown State game, Carlos has to provide more than 3 assists because that's what you brought him into this team to do, is to pass and create offensively. When Lampkin is your leading assister with 7, that's cool. But that's something that Syracuse fans should not be expecting as the norm, especially with the flashy plays that Lampkin pulled off, especially in towards the latter part of the second half and in overtime. You cannot expect that to be the consistent norm of how you generate offense against the Power 4 competition that Syracuse is about to face.
Yeah, I mean, a 3/4 width of the court dish from your center to somebody for a wide open 3 it's a great look, but it's not something you can rely on. Was awesome in the moment. Ultimately, okay, it is what it is. I like to see him getting dishes, but it's not gonna sustain this team. I'm gonna go at the 16-minute mark to the Steve is Old Bank, and actually to when Steve was on the hill in the 2007 to 2008 season, my first year up on the hill for grad school. That was the dynasty year. The Johnny Flynn, Paul Harris, Dante Green, and I'm not implying that this team feels like that, but the start of the season wasn't too far off, where you had some games that were a lot closer than they should have been, from a team that had a standout freshman that is doing what he's doing, and a team that really could not figure out how to play defense. And that seems to be where we're at present. I feel like that this team can pivot and not turn into what that team did, including losing to UMass in the Dome. But that was a team that was destined for the NIT, and the way you're playing against these first 3 teams does not fill me with any sort of optimism that says this team is not an NIT team.
And once again, I have to reiterate this point since I talked a lot about Carlos. Bell has to do better than shooting 1 from 8 from 3.
Yeah.
Just in the modern day of basketball and how just modern basketball works, you have to shoot the 3 more efficiently than that.
Well, and if you're not shooting the 3 more efficiently than that, you have to know that you're not shooting the 3 more efficiently than that and find some way to make offense some other direction.
Oh, you're saying you have to know when you're shooting 15%?
Sometimes that comes in handy. I mean, yes, shooters got to shoot, but shooters don't have to take contested threes from nowhere for no reason when you can't hit the broadside of a barn.
Who's over 70%? Who's over 70 years old and can shoot 15% right now? For those who don't know, that's still my favorite Boeheim presser moment.
That was a solid one.
Look up Jim Boeheim, Ron Patterson.
The bus.
A name that I love to hear. So before we move off of our vegetable platter and we move into the meat and potatoes of what we do best, we've kind of alluded to it in joking. The Steelers the Syracuse Orange are about to play.
Pull it together.
Both teams are playing on Thursday night against an Orange team. Okay, it's really throwing me off here. The Syracuse Orange are playing the Texas Longhorns at Barclays Center on Thursday night. I think we are all 3 unified in the expectation that this game is going to go poorly. What Christian, I'll start with you because you were the eternal optimist, sarcasm intended. What is the scenario here in which this game is interesting going into the last timeout under 8 minutes in this game?
It's basically what you started the podcast with. I started this basketball segment with. It's if Syracuse shows something interesting enough on offense to make this game interesting, because that's how Syracuse is going to win games in basketball, much like it has in football. It's going to go through its offense. And so can Syracuse develop something offensively that shows us that this is a more interesting Syracuse team than what we saw last year? I've been advocating for the past, 5 seasons now for Phoenix Suns 7 seconds or less. I think that's a Syracuse team that can do this. And especially when you saw it against Youngstown State. Yes, okay, different competition. But, Syracuse definitively won the rebound battle. So why can't you do the same, especially when you've got great rebounders like Lampkin and Freeman now on this team? So
because you shoot like a bag of ass and can't make your own shot.
I mean, yes, theoretically, that's, a reason why that's not, working as well. But 7 seconds or less offense can help you increase the frequency of your high percentage shots. So maybe that's one way you do it, but show us something offensively that shows you, hey, we're willing to evolve and adapt offensively, because that's going to be our best way to try and win games this year, because right now our defensive personnel is still not where Red wants it to be in order for him to run the defense that he wants to run now under his own system.
Steve just had a little sneeze there.
Yeah.
I was going to let him take the next comment, but I don't disagree. I think the other part of this that just needs to change, the switching on this defense has just been absolutely atrocious. I know that there's an adjustment happening as we go from man to zone, but it should not be this bad.
Are we talking football or basketball?
Yes.
Porque no los dos. But yeah, the zone, the man defense, especially like Lampkin looked a lot better against Youngstown State, but against Colgate too, like I don't think a single player has put together 30 minutes of consecutive decent defense. And that to me is very concerning as we start playing better opponents.
Yeah, it really is. And we're going to see, I'd assume, some growing pains. I don't know. This year is a weird situation, especially seeing what is forming up for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We probably should talk about that after this.
Yeah, I figured we'd segue into it at some point after we got through the complete vegetables, because that looks like a regular charcuterie board showing up after the.
Oh, I thought we were going into it once we hit the Steve is old part.
Let's finish Steve's analysis and then let's get into the actual filet mignon that is coming to our table.
No, I don't know if people. I'd assume people understand what's supposedly coming in next year, because on top of what we just heard, there was also what's the class? How many people are the class of 25 up to now?
4.
And all of them relatively solid ranked.
Top 5 recruiting class in the country.
It's a top 5 recruiting class. You have 1 3-star in Aaron Womack. Then everyone else is at least a 4-star.
Yeah, and there's 1 4-star that some people may want to hear about.
Oh, it's a spicy one. Literally spicy, because that's how you pronounce his name. As we now know, it's Cayenne Anthony, like cayenne pepper. There are many different ways that we've heard it pronounced, but all throughout the podcast, Lala and Mello were pronouncing it cayenne, like the pepper.
Yeah, never knew that.
Mm-hmm. So it's not Keon or Cayenne. It's Cayenne Anthony.
Yeah. So for anyone who didn't know, we now have a legacy recruit from Steve's freshman year of college. Jesus, I'm old.
Wait. Time out. your freshman year was Carmelo Anthony's freshman year.
Correct.
Meaning that Carmelo, same age as you, has
turned 40 this year.
Who has a son who is playing basketball for Syracuse.
Will be next year, because if anyone didn't hear, Cayenne Anthony, the son of Carmelo Anthony, have you heard of him? Will be attending Syracuse University on the morrow, and will be in the class of 2025 for Syracuse basketball.
Now, Steve, why isn't Seabass a member of the class of 2025 of Syracuse basketball?
He's got about 11 years left or so.
Steve, Christian got my punchline bit there. We are hitting simultaneously. Steve is old. Steve is the dad. We're just doing it all right here, because it is kind of insane to me that I know that those graphics have you seen the graphics that have been posted about the number of legacy kids who are going to be playing basketball next year? It is a full 20 deep roster of guys that I remember from playing video games who now have children who are going to be playing college basketball. And it's not like, oh, they're playing at insert small regional school. Like they're good programs. And I am terrified, feeling old. I cannot imagine what it was like to be the same age as Carmelo Anthony and now realize that his son is playing. But the holistic, I think that the actual jokes aside bit here that we should be taking away from this, Cayenne Anthony is not Carmelo. I don't think there will ever be another Carmelo Anthony. And I mean that not as in reverence to Syracuse. I mean that the sport has fundamentally changed.
I mean, there hasn't been another Carmelo Anthony since 2003, and I don't foresee there being at any school moving forward. Outside of somebody that completely flew under the 5-star radar and just happened to have to land there. You know what I mean? Especially
with the NBA more and more trending towards abolishing the one and done rule. You're going to there will not be much more room for a college freshman to have the same impact and same legacy on a program like Melo did with Syracuse.
Right. And I say this because we are the Halt Your Expectations podcast. But legitimately, Cayenne Anthony projects more like Jimmy Boeheim than Carmelo Anthony. And I think that is a hot, sorry, not Jimmy Boeheim, Buddy Boeheim. He projects more like a Buddy Boeheim than a Carmelo Anthony.
Okay. I think still a disservice to Cayenne. I think he will be better than Buddy, but nowhere near his father.
Yeah, I was actually talking about this with Chris Carlson earlier this week, is that when you take a look at Buddy, he severely overachieved and his expectations at Syracuse, because he was just a 3-star coming out to Syracuse, and he went far and beyond past those expectations.
No, to be fair, if he didn't, those teams would have been even worse than they were.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I mean this with no joke, with no bits aside here. That's what Cayenne's going to need to do for these Syracuse teams coming up, because I do not see any kind of support in order to help him very similarly to the way that Buddy did not have a whole lot of support when it came to the offensive side of those Syracuse teams. And that's why I say, Christian, to your point, did Buddy overachieve his ranking? Yes. Buddy produced the way that you would expect a high 4-star to produce. Cayenne is a high 4-star. And I just, they profile very similarly. I think it's a situation where we're going to rely on him to do a lot of scoring. And it's not going to be pretty the first year. But by year 2 or 3, if he decides to stick around that long, I think he can fundamentally help this program win. And then the ceiling becomes, what do you do around him as a 3-and-D guy?
And you got to remember, Buddy didn't really blossom until his third season at Syracuse. It
Right.
was off the bench on season 1, getting his feet under him on season 2, but started to, try and find it, and it really came into the buddy we started to know and love in season 3 of Game of Thrones. Why did I say that?
Yeah. So also in the class, for anyone who doesn't know, Sadiq White Jr., a 6'8" power forward, Aaron Womack, who is a 6'6" small forward, and Luke Fennell, who is an Australian shooting guard who is 6'6".
And while Anthony will get the headlines because of the name, White is the centerpiece of the class right now, at
He's
least.
what, 15 in the class? Something like
Yes,
that?
he's 15 by ESPN's rankings. By comparison, Anthony is 36. And don't remember, Syracuse might not be done because Anthony and Syracuse are heavily recruiting Alex Costanza, who I believe is 26, thinking of reclassing to 25 and as a 5-star. So
Yeah, and Costanza's a true swing, true 3 swing. Whereas the Cayenne, actually, he's quote unquote only 6'5" compared to his dad, and plays as a true 2.
exactly. So while the hype is going to be around Anthony, really he's not even like the highlight leader of the class in terms of basketball ability, because it's White, at least right now. And I think a lot of people would say that.
Now, this all said, even with this class, Red's going to have to look to the portal again, because you still have outgoing Jaquan Carlos, the transfer that came in. Who else is leaving? McLeod and Lampkin are both seniors, right?
Yeah. This is Lampkin's last year, because he spent 3 years at TCU, I believe, and then a year at Colorado.
And then, yeah, I think that's everybody that has to leave.
And I think what I will say, and this will tie nicely into both of our sports that we cover here, is that, just broadly looking NCAA wise, unless you're the military schools and for some reason Dabo Sweeney, you have to go portaling every year. That's just the nature of how NCAA works now. And I think, and that's why you're seeing coaches starting to get out of college. Especially you started seeing it last year and you're starting to see it again this year, is because coaches just aren't willing to adjust to the new era of transfer portal and NIL.
Right, you're seeing the old guard transfer out, and dare I say, folks like Fran Brown thriving.
Yeah, exactly. With showers, apparently.
Right.
Andy, do you think Conefield makes shower equipment or something like that?
I'm just going to say this. I know that Home Field is working on a lot of different ranges and they're working on a lot of different things out there, but I do not believe that they are getting into the sanitation area of personal apparel.
I can't get my Home Field shower scrubby?
I don't think you can, but if you use promo code NUNES24, NUNES24, you can get 15% off your first order of Home Field apparel at homefieldapparel.com, which includes wonderful long sleeve sweaters and t-shirts like what Steve is wearing. Normally, I would be wearing my Home Field apparel. Last night, I went to a Spider-Verse live in concert event, and I was wearing Home Field head to toe because they just have. I've been getting into the core collection, like the basics, like hoodies and sweatshirts, and I got the jacket. It is just really nice everyday wear. They've really cracked the code on pretty much anything that you could possibly want. And you can join Steve, Christian, and myself in rocking Home Field apparel by using the promo code NUNES24, NUNES24, for 15% off your first order at Home Field apparel.
One thing I did find out, they are now in the youth sizes game.
Yes, and Steve,
my last order, Seabass got a wonderful Q's t-shirt.
It does make me very happy to know that this is something that Home Field is getting into. That because at the end of the day, we are just here to grow oranges. No matter where in the country you might be, And much like the book, How to Grow an Orange, that was birthed on the West Coast, the Syracuse Orange went west and found success as the Orange defeated the Cal Golden Bears. The Orange have now won 7 football games this season. They have now won 3 games on the road with Fran Brown against conference opponents or top 25 opponents. That is half of the total that Dino Babers achieved in 8 years as a head coach. I wish I was kidding.
That's incredible.
I say all this to say, Steve, Christian, before the season, we said 7 to 8 wins, unequivocal success. They should beat UConn this weekend and get to 8 wins. Again, UConn looking a lot trickier than we thought they were going to be, but unequivocal success for Syracuse football this year. I like personally, I'm stunned. Like genuinely stunned that the football team looks this good this year.
And it's a lot of it is also because when you see Syracuse in wins like this against Cal and their previous wins this season, there were always twinges of doubt with Dino's teams about could these wins carry the momentum into the next week and the next season, la-di-da-di-da. You don't have those feelings necessarily with Fran's teams. Now, are there problems that show up every week, even in wins and losses? Yes, but you aren't left with the same feeling of, that was nice, but can they translate in the future? With Fran, you're thinking, that was a great win. There are some problems, but I'm pretty confident that this coaching staff can fix it. And that is the majority of the feeling of why this year is not just a success because of you would assume 8 wins that Syracuse is going to get with a victory over UConn next week.
Yeah, I'm not going to say those words strictly because I don't want to jinx anything, because UConn doesn't look like a complete pushover, but also is UConn. So stupid things can be stupid. I will hedge my bets that we are at 7 wins, which we did qualify for an unequivocal success. And much like you said, every single time that something has come up for this team, and dare I say this was the first quote-unquote complete performance that we've seen. The offense looked good, the defense looked good, and the special teams didn't look horrible. All of those things happened. And it's amazing that every week, like you said, Christian, things that were a problem the last week are no longer a problem the next week because they actually address them and they actually work on things and move things forward. We saw things like Fadil Diggs being unleashed as an edge rusher and actually doing what he made a name for himself at Texas A&M doing when he wasn't out of necessity being forced to do the rest of the defense. We saw things like McCord actually looking very comfortable and the offensive line not completely sucking. There were bright spots all around, and I'm very happy to see this evolution of this team and the fact that in week whatever we're at 10, things can continue to evolve and aren't stuck in the mire that they were in seasons past.
Andy started this podcast off after we went through our open with the malaise around the Syracuse basketball program. There definitely isn't that around the football program because there are exciting things to be excited about every week with the Syracuse football program. Not like the Orange men's basketball program, which, like Andy said, is, at least from our perspective, feel free to agree or disagree on this, it's still trying to find an identity. There seems to be a clear identity for the Syracuse football program. And that's what makes this season exciting, especially in the position that the season is at right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the more interesting elements that we have not seen under past administrations is the acceptance that what we thought would work is not working, and it's time to change. Like this team, something that we were talking about in the Slack during the game, we thought we saw players on very different snap counts than we had seen all season before, particularly in the defensive secondary and on the offensive line. And in particular, we knew that the tackle position was not a strong part of this line. And we saw in a game after the Orange had already clinched a bowl game, after the Orange had already done what in most seasons would be good enough, the coaching staff was still willing to tinker and still willing to experiment to find what is the best version of this team. Not necessarily next year's team. What is the best version of this year's team? And to me, that is such a cultural mindset shift where every single game matters that I think this fan base has been clamoring for, even though we can sit here and say 7 to 8 wins is like what we should be aiming for as a unequivocal success. The coaching staff is saying, yes, but how can we make sure that those 7 to 8 wins are as good as we can possibly be? And again, Steve, I have not played the game. It is really hard to tell somebody who you gave the starting position to for 10 games and say, you're not doing good enough. It's time to sub you out. Like, that is not an easy conversation to have. But Fran seems willing to have those conversations and is willing to put his entire ethos behind, I think this is good for the team, and have the team buy into it. And that, to me, is the takeaway from this year, is saying, like, this is a new guy in the building, and this is a guy who we should be building a program around.
2 things before Steve jumps in. 1, you even saw it on the defensive side when, hey, guy comes in late. Guess what? It might be game 10 on the season. You're not starting, and you're not even going to play.
Yeah.
So, oh well. That sucks for you, but you still got to follow the rules, even if the program is, like Andy said, where most fans would have clamored for it to be at the past 8 years. And second, point 2, I'm glad I talked to David Wallaby last week.
Wait, what?
I got a chance to
nice.
talk with David Wallaby last week before the game.
Do you have something forthcoming there?
Yeah. Now I do, especially because it's very relevant.
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, that is an impossible conversation to have, but it's also one, like Christian said, on the defensive side, he flat out and came to the press and said, listen, one dude was late, the other guy wasn't showing up in practice, somebody else, I can't remember what the third thing was, but he said, somebody else wasn't doing their shit, and Davian Kerr is going to get the start and gets that pick. And it's like, okay, like, next man up, you earn your spot, you don't screw around, you do what you're doing. And it's I don't want to call it an old school mentality, but it's a very different mentality than anything we've seen from around here. It is in that, I guess it is an old school mentality. It's in that P and DeLeon vibe of that 90s coaching style of you are and it's something that needs, I won't disagree, needs to get brought back, of you are accountable for what you're doing, and what you're doing on and off the field has ramifications on what you're seeing on Saturdays. And that seems like it's something that is, I guess, pervasive throughout the program at this point. And Brown is not afraid to show up to someone and say, you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, therefore you are not doing it anymore. And the next guy up can prove if he is the guy to do it. And I can't complain about that in any way, shape, or form.
It goes to the if you guys remember the Moneyball scenes when Brad Pitt and Billy Beane starts to make the trades to turn around the season, it feels like a conversation with Fran Brown is much like having a conversation with Brad Pitt's characterization in that moment. He's going to tell you like it is. He's going to tell it straight, and you accept it or you don't, because you're a part of this team.
I mean, he literally said, if you don't like that, there's a portal. Like he
And
said
we know
that
Fran
to
likes
the
portaling.
press.
Yeah.
He said that to the press. That
And we know
if
Fran
you're
likes
not going to
portaling.
listen to me, 100%. But he's like, if you're not going to listen to me, you're not going to get behind me, you're not going to be on my team, get the hell out.
And the big thing is that with some coaches, that type of speaking probably doesn't work.
Right.
With Fran Brown, you feel the seriousness of that statement. You believe those words.
Right.
And,
there's a sincerity to it.
Yeah, and you also feel like, hey, that's actually a guy I still want to play for. At least if you've got the motivation behind it.
Yeah.
It feels like, that's a guy that, more and more we're understanding why Fran was the number 1 rated recruiter last season. Because like he said, like he's talked about with us during the press, he's a genuine guy. He's going to tell you like it is. Who you see in the press is who you probably see in practice as well when the cameras and the media are not there. He's probably like that in walkthroughs and team meetings. That's the Fran Brown that we're most likely seeing. I know there's not a lot extra seasoning that goes on to the Fran Brown that we see in public versus the Fran Brown we see in private with his team.
Yeah.
If you're in education, it's a book called Difficult Conversations. If you are in tech or finance, it's a book called Radical Candor. This is modern communication in an educational setting. And it is about consistency. It is about directness. It's about honesty. And those things working well together when there is an environment of trust and an environment of, I understand that by being here, I have opted into something. And I do think that what we have seen previously is that was not the case about both the trust and the opting in, and like the general understanding that I am opting into something. And one of the things that I was very worried that Fran was doing was creating a very high opt-in bar for this team. He made it abundantly clear. You need to be doing things out of the classroom. You need to be in the classroom consistently. You need to be performing in the classroom. You need to be performing on the practice field. Those are really high bars to set at a university like Syracuse, where we don't probably deserve that. But Fran has brought that level of respect both to the program and to the players who are opting in. And I will forever feel incredibly confident that we made the right decision because that is the standard now. And again, it's like,
yeah. Can we please talk about that, Andy?
Yeah.
Making the right decision. I am so sick of seeing what I believe is a vocal minority, but still a minority but still people talking about online after losses like the one last week to Boston College of Fran Brown was the wrong hire. We should have hired XY coach. Games like this and weeks like this leading up to this game with the candor that he showed in the media and the response that his players showed in the media in the lead up to this game show me why Fran Brown was not only the right hire, but shows you why are you so upset and looking to pull the plug this early, and also trying to look in hindsight being 2020 saying, oh, we should have hired this guy instead.
I don't disagree with anything like the comments about like, oh my gosh, we should have beat Stanford. We should have lost Virginia Tech. Like, the hardest thing about college football is consistency. That is why, like, all credit to Dino aside, consistently good, not occasionally great was his mantra, because that is what the Saban teams were. That is the goal that you are going for in this sport. And it's the goal because it's impossible. This is not a sport where being consistent is achievable, especially in an amateur setting. And I am genuinely am impressed with the fact that this team hasn't had a losing streak. I am genuinely impressed that this team has not made the same mistake twice, back-to-back weeks. Now, to your point, Christian.
Do you know how hard that is? Do you know how hard that is? That is.
I know how hard that is for me as like a professional in my day-to-day job.
Right.
Like I know how hard that is for me to not make the same mistake like in back-to-back weeks. And yes, I do think that this is where Franz. I'm going to be the first one to say this, and I think other people might have to say this as well. I pigeonholed Fran as a recruiter, as a motivator, and not as a tactician, and not as a CEO of a program. And it is abundantly clear this man is obsessive about every single thing that happens in and out of his building with his players, and knows every single thing that's happening with his players in and out of the building to a level that you need to have to be a good coach in today's day and age.
Yeah.
But to a level that I do not think that a lot of us in the media gave him the respect of, whether that's because he's a black man, whether that's because he came as a recruiter, whether that's because he never had a coordinator job or a previous head coaching job. I think a lot of people underestimated Fran's tactical and organizational abilities as a head coach. And this season has proven with a less than elite team, he owns all of that and can drag this team's floor to a level that we have seen 3 times in the last 20 years. If we get to 8 wins,
right?
Like,
which people don't seem to comprehend that's all we've seen it.
Like, let's go back to Andy's point about how this team has never been on a losing streak. Let's analyze that. Lost to Stanford, brutal loss to Stanford after the 4th and 9 play. Who do you play the next week? It's a Friday night game against a ranked UNLV team who was looking to prove themselves on the national stage against a Power 4 opponent. And Syracuse grits it out and wins that game. Lost to Pittsburgh. Brutal loss to Pittsburgh, where McCord has his worst game as an Orange. You go up against next week a Virginia Tech team that made this Orange team look equally as awful last season. And you pull out the win. And then the Boston College. You know, now you're a rival for a long, long time. And you had a performance where people were openly not only criticizing the coaching, but especially the defense in brutal fashion. And you're going up against a Cal team who just picked up its first conference win the previous week and is also looking to make a name for themselves in the ACC, especially after great early season momentum and looking to reestablish that momentum after that very first conference win in the ACC. And you go into their building and dominate with the first half that you did. That's impressive to see the response after each of those losses this season.
Yeah. And that's, I know, Andy, you talked about people discounting Fran, and I was not one to completely discount him, but have a lot of question marks because of the unproven nature. And to Christian's point, he has responded in every single situation he's been put in. And I don't think there is a way or means or rational thought that can doubt what he is trying to build here. Now, where this goes from here, who knows? But at this point, the Fran Brown experience and the Fran Brown experiment are unmitigated successes in my brain.
Steve, you hit the nail on the head, because Doug Marrone had success and then left before it was time for that second step.
Yeah.
Dino Babers had the peak and could never build off of that level of success. The only, I'm not going to say Pasqualoni in here, because I think that there's a lot of arguments to be saying about it, like what he inherited versus what he built. But it's been since Coach McPherson, since Syracuse has successfully built something, had to go through the process of restocking that success, and then successfully maintained what it was.
How fitting is it that Coach McPherson goes into the Ring of Honor this weekend?
It feels like right now, Fran has achieved success faster than any coach in Syracuse history in arguably the toughest situation that any Syracuse coach has inherited. To the which I would say, I think that Fran, and it's less about what Syracuse was inheriting and more about like the current landscape of college football and Syracuse's place in the current landscape of college football. I think that is
fair, because that was going to be my cringe there, and I know you picked up on that.
I saw your eyes, Steve, and I was like, nope, I know where he's going with this. Let me explain.
Doug Marrone inherited Greg Robinson.
He did. Doug Marrone inherited bad, but Doug Marrone was able to keep his recruits for 4 years and not really let them leave.
Right.
So this is a situation where I think Fran Brown has done the most impressive one-year coaching job in Syracuse history. But the hardest challenge that you could drop any coach into is what Kirk Cignetti is dealing with at Indiana or what Fran Brown is dealing with at Syracuse. You are not the prime of the sport. But now everybody sees how successful you are. They see you're good players. They're going to try to portal the hell out of them. And your goal is going to be able to maintain that culture, retain the players that you can retain. And for the ones that you do lose, who do you bring in and buy into that culture to that same level of excellence and consistency that we've been talking about? And I'm not saying I think Fran Brown can do it, because I don't think anyone can do it. I think this is an inherently unfair game, and we are asking an impossible task. But if Fran can do it, and he can do it at Syracuse, man, I'm sorry.
He's beating the house right now.
Yes.
We're in Vegas, and he's beating the house. Like, that's the best way to think about it, is right now he's playing with house money. Like, we're already well ahead of where we thought we would be in the rebuild, or whatever was going to happen. And we have a Fran Brown who can hit the portal hard. We've got a proven track record of a turnaround from what we saw last year to what we saw this year. We're moving in the right direction. And, for one, Andy, I do need to note, if you ask some folks in our Discord, including the notable Terry, there is a viable chance that we get back to national prominence and winning national championships left and right. I don't think anyone realistically is going to think that is going to happen. However, I think we're in as good a spot, or moving in as good a direction as we can be in order with where we're sitting right now. You were formulating something there.
No, I say this as someone who presents himself as the eternal pessimist and as the stats guy and as the numbers guy. We are not built to do well in this at all.
No way.
We are not the Brighton. We are not even the Wrexham of this, to go with the soccer analogy here. We are the Stockport County.
We're like Huddersfield Town.
Yeah. And
Huddersfield, that's a shout.
Yes. And if Fran has figured out a way to move up the pyramid and build us up, I do not care if he leaves after 4 or 5 years. That in itself is we caught fire. Let's do some damage with it. The playoff is expanding next year. Maybe we get a playoff game. One playoff game is probably the peak of what we are going to get to. And I know that some Syracuse fans are like Terry might not love to hear that, but that's the truth, man. Also, this is the moment where I say, college football, man, it might not be the same in like 2 years when we're having this conversation. So look, we're just going to enjoy. We got to enjoy what we have now, because in 2 years it might be fundamentally different.
And what I'll say to put a bow on this conversation is, if Fran does leave a little bit earlier than people feel like, at least now this administration has an idea of what it looks like to build a successful program here, at least, and capture the vibes of a successful program that you want to build.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We now have a roadmap, and we're now moving in a direction that I think we all want to see.
Indeed, indeed. Well, unfortunately, Andy did have to bounce a little bit early, but fortunately for us, that will do it for the Disloyal Idiots podcast here on the Fans First Sports Network. We've got a lot of content coming up, especially with how packed basketball is going to be right now. So make sure you tune into and follow our sister site, newsmagician.com, for all the basketball and football coverage that is certainly coming your way. This is one of the busiest times of the year on our site, and it's a lot of fun as it all kicks off with the two major sports on the hill. Thanks,
if you do want to also continue this discussion on a instantaneous time by time basis, feel free to hop over to the Discord channel. You'll find links on the page that is, or the article that is posted on the News Magician site as well.
We thank Steve. We thank Andy as always for joining us. Thanks Steve for joining me as well here on the Disloyal Idiots podcast on the Fans First Sports Network. If you're watching on YouTube, Twitch, or on Twitter, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe, follow button so that you do not miss when these episodes air, usually Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're listening on your podcast platform of choice, we thank you so much for tuning in. As always, make sure you leave a rating, a review, a subscription, a comment so that we can trick the algorithm into expanding the Ottoman Empire. Got a lot of interesting storylines to follow amongst the Syracuse athletics programs in the coming weeks. So that, all we can say is go Orange.
Go Orange.